In a move that stunned even the most seasoned royal watchers, Queen Camilla was escorted out of the royal residence permanently. No explanation, no ceremony, just silence, followed by chaos. As press scrambled and aides vanished behind closed doors, the monarchy faced its most explosive fracture in decades. But what really happened behind those gilded walls? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The first signs came not through a grand announcement, but a ripple of confusion across royal reporters' feeds. An emergency press embargo was lifted prematurely. Then, within minutes, headlines flooded every major outlet. Camilla removed from palace residence, status revoked. The official palace statement was clinical: no warmth, no defense, no room for misinterpretation. Her Majesty the Queen Consort has been relieved of official residence duties, effective immediately. 16 words that detonated across every corner of the Commonwealth. No mention of Charles, no explanation. Just a finality that hinted at something far deeper, far darker, than the public had been told. Behind the scenes, panic took root. Clarence House, once a symbol of royal steadiness, became a flurry of urgent movement. Staffers, some loyal to Camilla, others shocked by the timing, were seen wheeling out files under heavy guard. Personal artifacts were packed hastily. Curtains drawn. Camilla herself was nowhere to be seen. But what made the moment unmistakable was the reassignment of her personal protection officers. A signal that her role had not just been paused, it had been erased. That level of security doesn't change unless someone is no longer royal in practice, no matter what the papers say. Speculation turned to frenzy. Was it health-related? A quiet abdication? A scandal about to break? The absence of clarification only fed the chaos. The palace, known for its meticulous control of narrative, had chosen silence. A calculated silence. One that echoed louder than any press conference ever could. Journalists combed through recent footage, analyzing every glance, every absence, every deviation from protocol. And all pointed back to one conclusion. This wasn't spontaneous. It had been coming. And the decision had likely been signed days, if not weeks, before the world was told. Inside royal circles, loyalty fractured. Senior courtiers who once championed Camilla were either quiet or suddenly unavailable for comment. Royal analysts who had defended her place within the monarchy now distanced themselves. Social media lit up with theories, petitions, and wild accusations. Yet in all the noise, one thing became clear: this wasn't about a temporary dispute or internal politics. This was about power, legacy, and a reckoning that could no longer be avoided. Because Camilla's removal wasn't just the end of a role, it marked the beginning of an unprecedented unraveling. One that would expose the buried conflicts, the silent tensions, and the war that had been quietly boiling beneath the surface. But to understand why the palace made such a drastic move, we must first look at the silent war that had been brewing behind the scenes for months. For years, whispers followed Queen Camilla wherever she went about her influence, her alliances, and the secrets she held. Many believed she had finally cemented her place. But behind the smile was a woman fighting not just for power, but for survival. Camilla's journey from mistress to queen consort was nothing short of historic. A transformation the palace fought to normalize and the public slowly began to tolerate. But acceptance does not mean belonging. Behind palace walls, her ascent never silenced the doubts, it merely forced them into darker corners. Among staff, her presence was described as commanding but calculated. Among insiders, it became an open secret. Camilla wasn't just navigating the monarchy, she was reshaping it from within. And her influence over King Charles grew with every passing day, tightening its grip as his health and clarity declined. Some saw it as loyalty, others, control. But where the true fracture emerged was in her growing tension with William and Catherine. What began as cautious diplomacy slowly devolved into something far colder. Catherine, once graciously tolerant, began pushing back in private. William, long burdened by his father's past, saw signs of history repeating. Camilla was no longer content with ceremony and tradition, she had become a central figure in high-level strategy. And her opinions on succession began to alarm those closest to the throne. Staffers, under condition of anonymity, leaked accounts of private meetings where Camilla had suggested alternative visions for the monarchy's future visions, in which the traditional line was not necessarily the most suitable one. Her interest in controlling narratives wasn't limited to the press. It extended into policy, appointments, and the very structure of who would rise and who would be sidelined. And she wasn't alone. Reports began surfacing of Camilla meeting discreetly with powerful donors and unelected advisors, individuals with personal stakes in the monarchy's future. These meetings, often unrecorded and unexplained, were cloaked in the language of charity, but fueled whispers of influence peddling. Decisions were being made in drawing rooms the public would never see. And all the while, Charles III began to retreat, physically present, but emotionally distant. Those closest to him began to worry. The king, once a force of continuity, now appeared increasingly isolated, speaking less in strategy meetings and deferring more to Camilla than to his own advisors or family. The whispers grew louder when longtime royal staffers, once loyal to the crown as a whole, quietly requested transfers. Aides loyal to William and Catherine began documenting concerns. And in the royal halls of power, two centers of gravity had emerged. Camilla wasn't simply occupying a space within the monarchy. She was building a court of her own. A separate network. A shadow monarchy that played by its own rules and answered to no one but her. And yet, she wore her smile like armor, as if daring anyone to question her right to be there. The public, unaware of the brewing storm, still believed in the image of unity, a carefully curated illusion. But inside the palace, battle lines had already been drawn. And while the public believed the crown was unified, one confrontation would reveal just how divided the royal household had become. Sources now confirm that what took place inside Windsor Castle 2 weeks ago changed everything. A private meeting turned into a royal showdown, one that left the Prince and Princess of Wales shaken, and Queen Camilla at odds with the future of the monarchy. The meeting had been scheduled discreetly, framed as a routine discussion regarding ceremonial duties and upcoming family events. But the tension in the air was palpable long before the first word was spoken. Behind those heavy doors there were no cameras, no aides, no courtiers, just William, Catherine, and Camilla, locked in a conversation that quickly spiraled into confrontation. The subject was George. More specifically, the role he was being pushed into, and who was behind it. Catherine had grown increasingly uneasy with what she described as a quiet pressure campaign, George being prompted, prepared, and positioned without parental consent. And all signs, she claimed, pointed back to Camilla. Camilla denied it, but her denial lacked conviction. What followed was a clash years in the making. William accused her of crossing lines that had always been unspoken, but understood, of manipulating George's public image, of meddling with succession optics, and of undermining the emotional well-being of a boy who never chose this path. Catherine, her voice cracking, reportedly told Camilla she would never let him be used as a pawn in someone else's game. Staffers positioned outside the room later recounted hearing raised voices unusual for this family, which prefers cold silences over heated tempers. But the confrontation reached a chilling peak when Camilla allegedly issued a veiled threat. If they didn't stop pushing her out of influence, she warned, she had means of protecting herself, a line that immediately raised alarms. Catherine froze. William stood. The silence that followed was louder than the shouting. In that moment, the relationship fractured beyond repair. William, with a level of finality few had ever heard in his voice, made it clear. Either Camilla withdrew willingly, or he would make it his mission to have her removed. The air thickened with tension, not just between individuals but between two visions for the monarchy's future, one built on quiet control, the other on emotional truth. And through it all, one absence spoke volumes: Charles. The king was nowhere to be seen. His refusal to attend this meeting, interpreted by many as a silent endorsement of Camilla, or worse, a cowardly escape. His detachment only fueled the fire. This was no longer a private family dispute, it had become a battle over influence, over succession, over the soul of the monarchy itself. And yet, even after the confrontation ended, and the three figures emerged with carefully neutral expressions, the damage had already been done. Whispers flew through palace corridors, advisors exchanged hurried messages, and something fundamental had shifted in the balance of royal power. But while that clash exposed the internal rift, it was a document found days later that would unravel Camilla's carefully maintained position, Buried deep within the royal archives was a letter handwritten by the Queen Mother, detailing her final wishes. What it revealed would shake the very foundation of Camilla's status and expose a betrayal buried under years of palace silence. The letter had been dismissed as myth by many inside the palace, a relic of outdated sentiment, perhaps even misplaced over time. But after the confrontation at Windsor, someone remembered it. A former aide, once close to Princess Margaret, confirmed its existence and location. What began as a whisper became a frenzied search through the royal archives, behind layers of sealed correspondence, until finally, a box marked with the Queen Mother's initials emerged. Inside it, a note written in her own hand, with unmistakable tone and terrifying clarity. In it, she expressed concern over the emotional vulnerabilities of her son, and warned against the influence of anyone who enters this family carrying past allegiances. Without naming Camilla directly, the implications were undeniable. But it was the final line that shattered the air of ambiguity. The crown must never be shared with one who compromised it. The letter included a clause never made public, never legally binding, yet deeply symbolic, stating her belief that any woman who entered the monarchy through controversy or scandal should never hold the title of queen. It wasn't law, but it was legacy. And in the world of monarchy, legacy holds more weight than fact. Princess Anne, who had long stood at a quiet distance from the unfolding drama, reportedly confirmed she had seen the letter years earlier, but out of loyalty or perhaps caution she had kept it buried. Now, it had resurfaced at the most dangerous possible moment. William and Catherine were quick to act. The letter was discreetly verified by palace archivists, and legal advisors were summoned. The paper, the ink, the handwriting, it was all authentic. And suddenly, the letter became more than an opinion. It became leverage. In private talks with senior officials, William presented the memo not as a weapon, but as a turning point, a moment to restore faith, a moral compass buried for too long. Catherine, with her measured grace, stood beside him not in protest but in purpose. Their message was clear: Camilla's elevation had always violated the unspoken boundaries of tradition. Now they had the words of a former monarch to prove it. The palace, caught in its own maze of protocol and secrecy, scrambled to contain the fallout. There were fears the letter would leak to the press, fears it would divide the public. But the most immediate concern was Charles. Would he defend Camilla? Would he dismiss his own mother's dying wish? Or had he too seen enough to begin questioning the reality around him? The monarchy was no longer facing just internal tension, it was teetering on the edge of legitimacy. Still, the monarchy doesn't move without the king, and what Charles did next would surprise even his closest confidants. For the first time in his reign, Charles III made a decision without Camilla by his side. Behind the palace gates, his health declining and his legacy at risk, he issued a quiet order that would become a royal earthquake. Those closest to the king had watched his transformation in recent months with a mix of concern and confusion. The once articulate and forward-facing monarch had grown quieter, withdrawn, more guarded. Whispers of his deteriorating health, both physical and cognitive, had been contained within the palace walls, but the symptoms were impossible to ignore. Missed briefings, repeated conversations, a hesitancy in public appearances that hadn't been there before. The man who once stood resolute behind a vision of modern monarchy was now a shadow of that image. But beneath the fatigue and the fading strength remained one final act of clarity, one final decision that would forever define his reign. In a rare and deeply personal meeting, Charles summoned William, no advisors, no aides. The two spoke for over an hour in private. It was during this moment, stripped of titles and public performance, that Charles confessed something that stunned his son. "I don't know who she is anymore," he said, referring to Camilla. His voice was weary, not with anger, but with something worse, disillusionment. He spoke of moments that no longer felt like his own, decisions being made without his consent, messages sent under his name, and the growing realization that what had once been a partnership had morphed into something he could no longer control. That night, Charles signed a single-page order. It bore no ceremony, no heraldry, just his name, and a directive that Camilla be relieved of all royal residence privileges. Her quarters were to be cleared, her staff reassigned. The order was sent directly to the keeper of the privy purse and the head of royal security. Only 4 people saw it before it was carried out, and none of them questioned it. The instruction was absolute, and it was final. By morning, Clarence's house was no longer Camilla's home. Personal items were discreetly boxed and moved, her name erased from internal schedules, her private line disconnected. Staff who had served her loyally were told they would be reassigned or released. No public statement was made. The silence was, as ever, the royal family's sharpest blade. But the true signal came not from paperwork or protocol. It came from Charles himself. That Sunday, the king appeared at church alone. No arm-in-arm arrival, no Camilla by his side. And when reporters asked if the queen would be joining him, the only response came from a press aide: "His Majesty will attend solo today." It was an answer that said everything without revealing a single detail. And so, with a stroke of a pen and a quiet walk into the chapel, Charles III dismantled the most controversial partnership in modern royal history. It wasn't rage that drove him, but resolve. A final moment of lucidity from a monarch desperate to reclaim what little legacy he had left. But this wasn't just about power, it was personal. And Camilla wasn't going quietly. Multiple sources confirm Camilla kept files. On everyone. From Charles's most vulnerable moments to William and Harry's darkest secrets, Camilla knew where every body was buried. And she was prepared to use them. Long before she was crowned queen consort, Camilla had mastered the art of survival. She didn't climb to the top of the monarchy by charm alone, she did it with precision, patience, and knowledge. And now, with her title stripped and her residency revoked, she was cornered. But not powerless. Inside her private vault, it said, were folders meticulously labeled. Documents, recordings, letters, some dating back years, some recent enough to make the entire royal household tremble. Aides who once laughed off rumors of a Camilla archive were now confirming its existence. Not in public, but behind closed doors. And according to one source, it wasn't just blackmail, it was insurance. Among the most disturbing claims were rumors of tapes. Audio recordings of Charles, in moments of unfiltered despair, confessions about his sons, his doubts about the monarchy, and his regrets about the past. Sentences that, if published, would fracture the royal family beyond repair. But it didn't stop there. One report suggests that Camilla had already contacted a foreign publisher, one with no legal obligation to respect royal protocol, about distributing a memoir that would lay bare her side of the story. Names, conversations, betrayals, no spin, no approval, just vengeance cloaked in truth. Then came the sighting. Camilla's most trusted aide, a woman known for her discretion and unwavering loyalty, was seen leaving a restaurant in Mayfair after a long meeting with a notorious tabloid editor. The same editor who had once led a scandal campaign against Diana and who now seemed poised to take on the next chapter in royal chaos. Word of the meeting spread like wildfire through the palace, triggering a wave of crisis meetings. William was the first to act, instructing his legal team to prepare injunctions, asset protections, and press strategies. He understood one thing above all: Camilla wasn't just lashing out. She was playing her final card. Catherine, ever the steady force, turned inward. With the press circling and the threat of scandal looming, she made the decision that cut the deepest: to prepare the children. George, Charlotte, and Louis were quietly briefed. Not with details, but with the truth that the family was under siege, and that the days ahead would be filled with questions they weren't yet old enough to answer. It was a moment no mother should face. And yet, Catherine bore it with quiet dignity, knowing that the real war was being fought not on television screens, but in hushed conversations and hidden vaults. Still, for all of Camilla's threats, there was one thing she hadn't accounted for: how far the palace was willing to go to silence the chaos. Because as the tension reached its breaking point, and the monarchy stood on the brink of implosion, something unprecedented happened. But before the storm could erupt, the palace executed one final move, a dramatic, irreversible gesture that silenced Camilla's influence once and for all. It happened at dawn. No headlines, no ceremony. Just a motorcade, a briefcase, and an order from the top. Queen Camilla, stripped of her titles, was escorted out of the royal residence, and this time, she wasn't coming back. It began in absolute silence, as all seismic moments in the monarchy often do. Before sunrise, an unmarked convoy arrived at Clarence House. The guards on duty had already been briefed. There were no royal salutes, no press vans waiting outside, just protocol, executed with surgical precision. Royal security, acting on a direct order from the king's private secretary, escorted Camilla out of the residence she once controlled. Her staff, those who had remained loyal, stood frozen, stunned by the rapid unraveling of her reign. Some wept, others watched in disbelief. But none dared intervene. It was clear now, this wasn't temporary. This was exile. Inside the palace, another order had already gone into effect. All departments were instructed to immediately remove the honorific Her Majesty from internal communications. Emails, documents, event briefings. Her name was erased as swiftly as it had once been elevated. The monarchy, with all its rigidity and ritual, was now moving faster than anyone had imagined. There was no time for mourning. There was only containment. Camilla's personal belongings were boxed and transported quietly, without fanfare, to a private estate in the countryside. The property, though royal adjacent, held none of the authority or stature of Clarence House. It was isolation wrapped in luxury, a gilded cage. The message was brutal in its clarity. She was no longer part of the firm, not in appearance, not in protocol, not in power. The press, already circling with anticipation, were met with a statement so polished it bled ice. Her Majesty Queen Camilla will be stepping away from royal duties indefinitely. The monarchy remains committed to stability and continuity. No mention of removal. No acknowledgement of the events leading up to her departure. Just the illusion of choice, thinly veiled behind cold control. But by then, the public already knew better. The silence had become deafening. Inside the royal circle, the restructuring was swift. Charles, physically present but increasingly diminished, signed over select powers to William in a sealed agreement. It was temporary in name only. William would now oversee key ceremonial and constitutional duties, a signal to the world that the future had arrived, and that the throne's center of gravity had shifted. Catherine, standing beside him in quiet solidarity, began stepping further into the vacuum Camilla left behind. This was not a coup, this was a cleansing. And yet, even with Camilla gone, the monarchy did not breathe easier. Because while she had been removed from the palace, her influence, her secrets, her supporters, her buried truths had not vanished with her departure. The ripples of her fall continued to surge through every corridor, shaking alliances, stirring fear, and raising one final question. If she could be removed, who else could be next? But even in exile, the consequences of Camilla's downfall were still rippling through the halls of power, and the next move would come not from the palace, but from the people. The news sent shockwaves through the UK and beyond. Some called it justice, others called it betrayal. But one thing was certain: the monarchy would never look the same again. In a matter of hours, the world erupted into a digital battleground. Hashtags surged to the top of global trends, hashtag justice for Charlotte, hashtag stand with Camilla, hashtag monarchy crisis. Voices poured in from every corner of the internet. Some hailed the palace's decision as long overdue, a bold stand against manipulation cloaked in tradition. Others condemned it as cruel, a public humiliation orchestrated to distract from deeper fractures within the House of Windsor. Outside royal properties, the split became physical. Protesters with signs supporting Camilla clashed with crowds praising Catherine and Charlotte. Chants of "protect the heir" collided with cries of "she earned her crown." The palace gates, once symbols of order, now stood between two nations divided by loyalty. In Westminster, the reverberations were political. Parliamentarians demanded answers. Was the succession now open to interpretation? Could the monarchy be swayed by internal power struggles? Calls for transparency echoed across party lines, and questions were raised in the House of Commons about constitutional clarity. But amid the noise, a surprising truth emerged. A leaked private poll conducted days after Camilla's removal revealed something no one anticipated. Public trust in the monarchy had risen significantly. Not just among the older generations, but with young people, those who had long viewed the institution as outdated and disconnected. Somehow, the chaos had made it human again. Real. Fallible. And perhaps, for the first time in decades, willing to evolve. As Britain looked inward, the world looked on. The international press seized on every detail. every photograph, every whisper of behind-the-scenes movement. European outlets speculated on a constitutional crisis. American media painted it as a royal reckoning a long-delayed fallout from Diana's legacy. Across continents, one name began appearing more and more often in headlines: Catherine. Not just as a supportive wife or devoted mother, but as the silent architect of reform. The woman who, without ever raising her voice publicly, had managed to shift the axis of the most famous monarchy in history. And still, the one voice that remained missing was the king's. Charles had not spoken. Not to the public. Not to Parliament. Not even through a spokesperson. His silence became a story in itself. Was it grief? Was it guilt? Or was it a quiet retreat into the final stages of a reign already overshadowed by controversy and collapse? Regardless of reason, his absence left a vacuum, and vacuums demand to be filled. The monarchy was no longer fighting a single battle. It was navigating a transformation under the relentless pressure of global scrutiny, generational change, and emotional exhaustion. And though Camilla had exited the stage, her fall had set off a chain reaction that could not be undone. Because the monarchy was not simply reacting, it was reinventing. A new rhythm had begun, and the world was marching to its beat. And as the world watched the monarchy transform, a final letter surfaced, one written not to the press, but to the future, in a handwritten letter released quietly through the palace website. Catherine, Princess of Wales, finally spoke. But instead of celebrating victory, she offered something far more powerful: forgiveness, reflection, and a vision for a new kind of royalty. Titled "To Those Who Walk Beside Us," the letter bore no crest, no gold-embossed seal, just simple script on cream stationery. Yet its words held the weight of a generation's reckoning. Catherine did not address Camilla by name, nor did she reference the chaos explicitly. But every sentence carried the echo of what had unfolded: the betrayal, the fear, the silence that had fractured the monarchy from within. "We are a family shaped by duty," she wrote, "but we are not immune to the fractures that affect every home." It was not an apology, nor was it an indictment. It was something far rarer in royal history: honesty. She spoke of sorrow. Sorrow for what had been lost, for what had been allowed to fester. Sorrow for the children, hers, and others who would grow up reading about these moments in history books rather than feeling the stability of a family that once stood tall. But she didn't dwell in pain. With deliberate restraint, she shifted from the past to the future, laying out a vision that broke with centuries of silence and protocol. A call for grace, for compassion, for a monarchy that does not rule from above but walks alongside. What shocked the world most was the tone, not triumphant, not defensive, but deeply human. She acknowledged the cost of power, and how, when wielded without conscience, it corrodes everything in its path. "We cannot rewrite what has already happened," she wrote, "but we can choose how we move forward, with dignity, with hope, and above all, with truth." These weren't just words meant for the press. They were words meant for history, for the people, for the institution itself. Then came the final signature, not just hers. Beneath Catherine's name, in bold, unmistakable print, was William's. No statement, no quote, just his name, underscoring every sentence with quiet unity. It was the strongest message yet from the next generation of the monarchy. That they would not lead as symbols, but as people. That their reign, when it came, would be forged not through silence, but through clarity, compassion, and consequence. The letter did more than quiet the public storm, it became a turning point. Overnight, newspapers that once printed scandal ran the letter in full on their front pages. World leaders, celebrities, and citizens alike shared it across social platforms, calling it a blueprint for modern leadership. It marked the moment when the monarchy, bruised, battered, but still standing, chose to evolve. Not because it had to, but because it finally wanted to. Because sometimes, the end of a reign isn't about crowns or castles, but about truth, redemption, and the courage to start again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.